All right, let's jump right in. Today's deep dive, language learning. We're following Ava's journey to English fluency. And get this, we have her actual podcast to guide us. It's amazing. We hear everything, all the ups and downs, like a real behind the scenes look. She goes from beginner to fluent in just 2 years.
Yeah, it's like having a front row seat to her progress, not just the final polished result, but the real, sometimes messy journey. That's where the real learning is, right?
Totally. And speaking of messy, her podcast starts right when she arrives in London. University lectures, trying to order coffee, talk about a baptism by fire. I mean, even watching Friends was a challenge at first. Can you imagine being surrounded by English 24/7 as a beginner?
Total sensory overload, right? Think about it. Even in our native languages, we don't catch every single word. Now imagine doing that in a language you're still learning while also trying to learn vocabulary and grammar. No wonder she felt overwhelmed at first.
There's this one scene in her podcast. She's in her first university lecture. The professor's talking about fundamental principles, and she's just like, fundamental what now?
Yeah.
I think we've all been there at some point in our learning journey.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of being lost, wanting to give up, it's a common hurdle. But, and this is what I find so inspiring about Ava, she didn't quit. She came up with this clever strategy, immersion through listening, but with a twist.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What was the twist?
Well, instead of jumping into really complex stuff, she started with podcasts on everyday topics. The key. She listened at a slower speed at first. Then, as she got comfortable, she gradually increased the speed.
Brilliant. Easing yourself in instead of diving head first. Did she mention what types of podcasts worked best?
Yeah, she was into conversational podcasts, like people just chatting about daily life or news. She said it helped her get used to the rhythm and flow of natural speech, way different from that formal, structured language you find in textbooks.
That makes sense. It's how people actually talk, not that perfect grammar you see in books. Did she use any other methods for listening?
Oh, yeah. Audiobooks, but she always had the physical book too, so she could follow along. A great way to connect the spoken and written word. Plus, she rewatched familiar shows like Friends with subtitles. The goal was to pick up common phrases and get used to the natural speed.
So it's not just about quantity, it's quality and strategy. What surprised you most about how Ava approached this listening phase?
Honestly, her patience, the way she gradually increased the difficulty. She didn't expect to understand everything immediately. She understood that progress takes time and was willing to put in the work. It's a great reminder that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint.
Absolutely. So we've tackled the listening hurdle, but what about speaking? That's often the scariest part for language learners. Coming up next, we'll dive into how Ava went from being terrified to order coffee to competently chatting with locals. Buckle up, it's a wild ride.
If listening was a hurdle, speaking was like climbing a mountain for Ava. That feeling, like having to build sentences on the spot, pronunciation worries, that inner voice saying, what if I mess up? It's enough to make you just want to stay silent.
Oh, tell me about it. And Ava's podcast really captures that anxiety. She actually shares this recording of herself trying to order a coffee.
Yeah.
She wants a large, but all that comes out is, I want big coffee.
It's kind of painful, but so relatable. I've totally been there in my own language learning.
It happens to everyone, that fear of speaking, making mistakes, sounding silly, it can be paralyzing. But here's the thing about Ava. Instead of letting fear win, she tackled it head on.
That's brave. How'd she conquer this speaking mountain? Did she have a plan?
She did. A multi-pronged approach, starting with the basics, practicing phrases and pronunciation alone, in front of a mirror, low pressure, Then, conversation groups with other English learners. It's a safe space to practice. Everyone's in the same boat. No need to be perfect. That's a great idea. A supportive environment, making mistakes, learning together.
Did she mention what was helpful about those groups specifically?
She said they helped her overcome that initial fear of speaking. She realized everyone makes mistakes. It's okay to laugh at yourself sometimes. It's all part of the process. But she didn't stop there. She knew she had to push further, so she started talking to locals, even if it meant stumbling through sentences or repeating herself.
Wow, that takes guts. Putting herself out there, knowing she might make mistakes with native speakers. Did she have any strategies for when she felt lost for words?
Oh yeah, Ava always had this little notebook with key phrases for different situations, and she wasn't afraid to ask people to repeat or speak slower. Resourcefulness, not letting awkwardness stop her.
Such a good tip. It's easy to feel embarrassed, but most people are patient when you're making an effort. But she didn't just rely on random conversations, did she? Nope. Ava took a speaking course focused on role-playing everyday situations, ordering food, asking directions, small talk, all those things that can be nerve-wracking. She said it was super helpful to practice in a structured environment, get feedback from a teacher and other students.
It's like she was systematically building up her speaking muscle, targeting different communication skills. Did the podcast mention how she felt about all this speaking practice? Did the fear ever go away?
It's amazing. Over time, the fear just kind of faded. The more she spoke, the more confident she became. She realized people were patient and mistakes were just part of learning. That mindset shift is crucial for anyone learning a new language.
It sounds like she embraced progress over perfection. Not about sounding native overnight, but constantly challenging yourself, getting out of your comfort zone. It's so inspiring.
It is. And speaking of pushing boundaries, Ava's journey takes another turn with reading. From children's books to complex academic texts, she finds a way to not just understand, but enjoy reading in English. We'll dig into that fascinating part after a quick... You know what? No break. Let's keep going.
All right, diving right back in. We're on Ava's language learning journey, and now it's all about reading. What's fascinating is she goes from overwhelmed by academic jargon to actually enjoying reading in English. That's quite a change.
It is, and it shows how those language skills, they kind of build on each other. Remember how she nailed listening first? That really set her up for success with reading.
Right. That scene in the library comes to mind. She's staring at her textbook, totally lost, all that comprehensive analysis. And technical terms, it's like hitting a vocab wall. I can almost feel that panic. Did she say how she got past that feeling?
She did. And it's a strategy that could help a lot of learners. It's called a graded approach. Instead of forcing herself to understand those tough academic texts right away, she started simpler, like children's books, graded readers, those books made for language learners. Clear language, familiar themes, anything approachable.
That's smart, like building up your reading stamina, starting small before a marathon. Did she mention any specific books or authors she liked early on?
Not specific titles, but she did say children's books were surprisingly helpful. Simple language, engaging stories, often with pictures to help you understand. She also liked graphic novels. The visuals and text together made it easier to follow.
Great tip. It's all about finding stuff you actually enjoy reading, makes learning more fun. So as she got more confident, did she move on to harder stuff?
Absolutely. Gradually, she increased the difficulty, moving to news articles, then short stories, and finally, yes, even those tough textbooks. But here's the thing. She didn't just passively read. She actively engaged with the text, using different strategies to understand better.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What did actively engaging look like for Ava? Any specific techniques?
Definitely. Ava loved using dictionaries, not just for the meaning of words, but for those little nuances, how they're used in different contexts. She also kept a vocabulary journal, writing down new words, even drawing pictures to help her remember.
That's clever, making those unfamiliar words more tangible and memorable, like creating your own personalized dictionary tailored to your learning journey.
Exactly. And another trick, reading aloud. It helped with pronunciation, of course, but also made her slow down, absorb each sentence. Great way to internalize the rhythm of the language.
It's like training your brain to process the language on all levels, visually, orally, even kinesthetically. Did she talk about how she felt when she started using these active reading strategies?
She said it made a huge difference. At first, it felt unnatural, slow, but over time it became automatic, and she remembered more, enjoyed reading more. It's a good reminder, sometimes slowing down actually speeds up your learning in the long run.
So true. It's about finding what works for you and being patient. So listening, speaking, reading. We can't forget writing. Grammar struggles, finding the right words. Writing can be tough for language learners. Ready to unpack Ava's writing journey?
Absolutely. Writing is often seen as the hardest skill, right?
Right.
You need good vocabulary, grammar, but also style, tone, organization. And Ava's podcast gives us this raw look at her first essay draft in English. Short sentences, grammar errors, lack of flow, it's all there, something many learners can relate to.
Oh, I know I can. I remember those early days writing in another language. It feels like you're trying to express yourself with one hand tied behind your back. Did Ava share how she tackled those early writing challenges?
She did. It's simple but effective. She started a daily journal. Not about perfect grammar or fancy writing, just getting comfortable expressing herself, even if it was just a few sentences at first.
Great starting point. Takes the pressure off, lets you focus on getting your thoughts down. Did she mention how she dealt with those grammar gremlins we all face in a new language?
Oh, yeah. Ava embraced technology. She became a pro at using grammar checking tools to find her common errors and learn from them. But the key is, she didn't just blindly accept the corrections. She took time to understand the why. She'd look up grammar rules, do practice exercises, really trying to learn the correct way.
That's smart. Not just fixing the mistake, but understanding it to avoid it next time. But she didn't just rely on grammar checkers, right?
Nope. Ava knew feedback from others was important. She'd ask teachers, classmates, even friends to read her writing, give suggestions. It's a great way to get a fresh perspective, find areas to improve.
Like having an extra set of eyes to catch what you might miss. Did she mention any specific feedback that was especially helpful?
She did. Ava found feedback on the overall structure and organization super helpful. She realized she wrote in short, choppy sentences, and her ideas weren't always in a logical order, so she started focusing on topic sentences, transitions, the flow of her writing. She even mentioned mastering connectors, words like however, therefore, in contrast, to make her writing smoother and more sophisticated.
Those little connecting words make such a difference. So by the end of her 2 years, had she overcome those writing hurdles?
She had. Ava was writing well-structured essays, expressing herself clearly and confidently. She even gave a presentation in English, showing off her fluency to her classmates and professors. Just goes to show, consistent effort, targeted practice, and embracing mistakes really pays off.
Ava's story is truly inspiring. She went from lost and overwhelmed to owning the English language in just 2 years. It's a powerful reminder that fluency isn't about being perfect, but about communicating effectively, expressing yourself.
Totally agree. Ava's journey shows fluency as a process, not a destination. It's taking small steps every day, embracing those stumbles, finding joy in learning. It's a journey anyone can take, no matter where they start.
So for our listeners on their own language learning adventures, what's the key takeaway from Ava's experience?
If we boil down all of Ava's wisdom into one question, it's this. What's one small thing you can do today to use more English? Could be listening to a podcast, reading an article, or even just thinking about your day in English. Every step counts.
That's a great question to think about as we wrap up our deep dive. So to everyone listening, remember Ava's story. Embrace the challenge, celebrate those wins, and never stop exploring language learning. Until next time, keep those ears tuned in, those tongues practicing, and those minds open to new possibilities.